Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. As for this video we finally have a new GPU comparison, one that I've been working on for quite some time, being it the RX 7700 XT versus the RTX 4060Ti 16GB. And I also added the 7600 XT results that also has 16GB to see how the results would stack up. And by the way, I want to thank NVIDIA for sending the RTX 4060Ti 16GB. It makes things way easier if I don't actually have to buy all the hardware that I test, and having the 4060Ti 16GB sent to me was actually pretty nice from NVIDIA, so thank you very much once again. Now as for the pricing. In the US, you're able to get the RX 7600 XT for $304, now also including 2 games according to the most recent AMD campaign, the 7700 XT for $379, which is $75 above the 7600 XT, not even $100 for a new performance bracket, and then we have the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB for a minimum of $449, basically $70 over the 7700 XT that already makes no sense, but still, it is what it is. As for the European prices using Mind Factory Germany, we get the 7600 XT for 340 euros, which is a bit more expensive than in US, of course. Then we have the 7700 XT for 399 euros, which is really close to the American price, unlike the 7600 XT, making it like a 50 euros difference, which is already pretty low for a new performance bracket. And then we have the 4060 Ti 16GB for 450 euros, which is actually basically the same as the $449 in US. Actually, since we have the taxes, it is even better in Europe since we already have the taxes in and it costs basically the same. And with all these price differences, should you go for the 7600 XT since it is way cheaper? Should you go for the 7700 XT, which is the mid-tier in terms of price? Or should you go to the 4060 Ti 16GB as it should be better in ray tracing, has more VRAM? Well, we got once again some really interesting results. So let's see them, right after today's sponsor, of course. Today's sponsor is Maximum Settings, a cloud-based gaming service where you won't need to spend thousands of dollars to upgrade your PC or a personal nuclear plant to boot up your system. Just do it! For as low as 9.95 Canadian dollars a month, you can play the most recent games on your computer even if your hardware isn't prepared. And now with increased performance and reduced latency thanks to the bare metal technology. And believe me, I tested it and it runs very well. Sign up today for your full Linux gaming PC with no resource sharing and start enjoying high-level gaming on any PC. So benchmarks. Today we start with Cinebench R24, and according to the software, HIP is being used, meaning that AMD is at least getting a mild performance increase. And even though the RX 7700 XT is 43% faster than the RX 7600 XT, which is a huge difference, it is still not even close to achieve the RTX 4060 Ti's level of performance. That is 63% faster than the 7700 XT and 2.34 times the performance of the RX 7600 XT, which is insane even though it costs a bit more. Although in video editing with Premiere 2024 things change, and the RX 7700 XT is now virtually on par with the RTX 4060 Ti across the board, with the RX 7600 XT delivering around 84% of the other card's performance, which is actually not bad. As for image creation with stable diffusion using the Procyon benchmarking software, we get the RTX 4060 Ti being the top dog once again, in this case 19% faster than the RX 7700 XT, while the same is a whopping 67% faster than the RX 7600 XT, which is something I honestly didn't expect, especially knowing how far AMD usually is in terms of productivity. And things get even better for the AMD cards with the AI Vision benchmark. That includes several AI tools tested one after the other. And here the RTX 4060 Ti is only 14% faster than the RX 7700 XT, even though it is usually more expensive, with the RX 7600 XT being once again the worst performer, as expected. And to finalize the productivity benchmarks, we have Blender Open Data. Now, this benchmark does not support the HIP-RT or HIP-RT, which is a part of Rock'em that makes AMD GPUs perform better in Blender. It is available for Blender, but the Open Data benchmark doesn't have it yet. Still, according to my search online, the results on the AMD GPUs should be around 1.5 times the performance you see here, which would make them deliver considerably better results, of course, but still far from the ones that we get with the RTX 4060 Ti. Let's now watch some gaming benchmarks. Starting with Plague Tale Requiem, we see the RX 7700 XT being the fastest one by a decent margin, in this case at 1080p by 22%. It is worth noting though that in very heavy games like this one, the RX 7700 XT will be pulling around 240 watts tweaked, while the RTX 4060 Ti will be pulling around 160, which is a difference of 80 watts, and that's a lot. At 1440p, the RX 7700 XT just solidifies the victory even more, now being 26% faster, delivering around 80 average FPS, while the other cards struggle to deliver around 60. In a later games such as Assassin's Creed Mirage, especially at 1080p, the cards consume a lot less power, and in this scenario the 7700 XT only consumes 40 watts over the 4060 Ti, but it is only 7% faster at 1080p. The difference does increase to 10% at 1440p though, but the RTX 4060 Ti works very well in this title, especially for the power it consumes. Even the RX 7600 XT is able to deliver almost 80 average FPS here. Not bad. With Cyberpunk 2077, the power difference is now around 60 watts, which is kind of the middle ground in between the last two games, with the RX 7700 XT being now 20% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti, that is only 12% faster than the little RX 7600 XT. At 1440p, the AMD cards just gain more ground, with the RX 7600 XT getting close to the RTX 4060 Ti, and the RX 7700 XT being now 30% faster, which will make a lot of difference for this game in terms of raw power. Now we just need FSR 3.1 in this game. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is a game known to favor AMD GPUs, and that can be easily seen here, as even the RX 7600 XT beats the RTX 4060 Ti while being less expensive. And at 1440p the difference is just massive, with the RX 7600 XT being on par with it, and the RX 7700 XT being 43% faster, which turns a winning into a massacre. Forza Horizon 5 is a game that runs very well with the Ada Lovelace GPUs, also known as RTX 4000 series, but the RTX 4060 Ti just can't compete with the RX 7700 XT here, being barely faster than the RX 7600 XT at 1080p. Thing that does not change at 1440p, where all scales get maintained, and the RX 7700 XT is just the best performer, reaching over 140 average FPS. And Hogwarts Legacy is just another one of those games that loves raw power, and in that matter the RX 7700 XT is just a much superior product, being at 1080p 30% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti, that is only 7% faster than the RX 7600 XT. At 1440p the difference is even more noticeable as both the RX 7600 XT and RTX 4060 Ti struggle to get around the 60 average FPS mark, while the RX 7700 XT is comfortably delivering 83, being around 35% faster than the other two cards. And like Forza Horizon 5, the RTX 4000 series GPUs work really well with Microsoft Flight Simulator, mostly due to the increased L2 cache compared to the previous generation. But even that is not enough to compensate the raw power difference in between the RTX 4060 Ti and the RX 7700 XT. And at 1440p things follow the same path more or less, where the RTX 4060 Ti consumes less power for sure, but it is also slower and more expensive. Alan Wake 2 is a game that, like Cyberpunk 2077, carries a lot of NVIDIA's features, like DLSS frame generation and ray reconstruction. But when we're talking about FPS numbers, the RX 7700 XT is just a much more solid card, being 27% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti and 41% faster than the RX 7600 XT. At 1440p, the only card being able to push over 60 average FPS is indeed the RX 7700 XT, with the RTX 4060 Ti being closer, but not quite there. And even Avatar Frontiers of Pandora surprised me. This game is always using some kind of ray tracing implementation with GPUs that have hardware support for it, of course, and even here, where the NVIDIA GPUs tend to be much faster in all comparisons I made compared to the AMD counterparts, the RX 7700 XT is outmatching the 4060 Ti. And at 1440p, the advantage the RX 7700 XT has gets even bigger. And if you're asking yourself why the 7700 XT is so much faster than the 7600 XT here, is because it has 52 computer units compared to the 32 computer units with the 7600 XT. Starfield though is kind of an outlier, and that happens because we don't have smart access memory working properly as it was previously, well, working. So the results we had before for the RX 7700 XT showed an increased performance with smart access memory, something that does not happen now, making the RTX 4060 Ti the faster card, with even the 7600 XT being very close due to its 18% performance increase with smart access memory. And at 1440p things get heavier on the GPU side, and the RX 7700 XT surpasses the RTX 4060 Ti, but only by a little, but still delivering way less performance than it should in this title, which is far from optimal, I guess. And kind of the same applies to The Last of Us. I don't know if it has to do with the amount of VRAM that we have for each GPU, but I believe that might be the case as the RX 7600 XT has 16GB, making smart access memory work better. But well, at 1440p, as soon as the GPU raw power kicks in, the RX 7700 XT is 16% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti and 29% faster than the RX 7600 XT, which seems about right. As for Robocop Rock City, it is another game that runs quite well with NVIDIA GPUs, with the RTX 4060 Ti being 19% faster than the RX 7600 XT, but around 16% slower than the RX 7700 XT, that now gets a much larger smart access memory performance boost compared to the RX 7600 XT. At 1440p, the RX 7700 XT is now 18% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti, but with the RX 7600 XT still being able to deliver around 60 average FPS, which is far from bad for a card with only 32 computer units. And to finalize, we have Hellblade 2 using TSR at 75% render scale, considering the game is quite heavy. At 1080p we have the raw power of the RX 7700 XT once again showing its dominance here, being 19% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti and 41% faster than the RX 7600 XT. At 1440p the RX 7700 XT is the only card being able to push over 70 FPS, with the RTX 4060 Ti not even reaching 60. And of course, the RX 7600 XT not even touching 50. As for the averages of the 13 games tested, the RX 7700 XT was the obvious winner, being at 1080p 17% faster than the RTX 4060 Ti and 19% faster at 1440p, which, even consuming way more power, makes it a clear winner considering it is faster and costs much less, with the RX 7600 XT being a bad buy here considering the price of the RX 7700 XT. But now you might say, well, but when you buy the NVIDIA cards, you're buying their features, like ray tracing or ray reconstruction for example. So let's see how that turns out.
But lost hope. We're not from here either. Stellantis locked us up here a year ago.
Firstly, we have Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, and even in a full ray tracing title like this one, where the AMD GPUs tend to lose to the NVIDIA ones apart from the 1% lows, the RX 7700 XT is able to virtually match the RTX 4060 Ti while delivering much higher 1% lows. That delivers a much smoother gameplay overall. And I can tell you that I noticed that smoothness increase when testing this game. Although as we move to Cyberpunk 2077, things change, with the RTX 4060 Ti being slower in rasterization, but 14% faster with ray tracing activated, and 18% faster with ray tracing plus upscaling. I expected a bigger difference here, as at 1440p it even decreases, with the RTX 4060 Ti now being only 7% faster natively and 12% faster when using upscaling, showing us that in this price bracket, the 7700 XT is the real good choice. In Resident Evil 4 we can see more of the same, with the RX 7700 XT losing a lot more performance than the RTX 4060 Ti when using ray tracing, but still being overall faster. At 1440p the difference gets way bigger, as this game loves bandwidth of course, and even though the RX 7700 XT has less VRAM, it has way more bandwidth due to its 192-bit bus. And it seems that as the resolution increases, the RTX 4060 Ti suffers more and more, now losing by 18% even when using ray tracing, being 35% slower without it. In Spider-Man Remastered things are more or less like before, nothing really new, but now the RTX 4060 Ti oddly wins in rasterization but slightly loses in ray tracing. Something that does change at 1440p, with the RX 7700 XT overtaking the NVIDIA card in all scenarios, also delivering better 1% lows when using ray tracing, in this case 15% better. And it is only at 4K that the RTX 4060 Ti somehow manages to be on par with the RX 7700 XT in ray tracing, but we're talking about 40-something FPS, so that doesn't really seem relevant to me. And the last game tested is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, with the RX 7700 XT now performing a lot better in rasterization, but being 17% slower in ray tracing, with the RX 7600 XT being far behind these two. And it seems that things get bad for the RX 7700 XT at 1440p when using ray tracing, and we can see that we're lacking VRAM, as the results are actually on par with the RX 7600 XT that is 45% slower in rasterization. The same happened, for example, with the RX 7600 non-XT that in this specific scenario delivers like 15 FPS. And well, since we now have lots of data, let's move to the final thoughts. And well guys, as you saw, if you're looking for a card that performs much better and is actually cheaper which is basically what everyone looks for, you have the 7700 XT in this price bracket, and it is completely unbeatable in this price bracket of around, let's say, 399 euros or $379. Unless you're buying used, if you're buying new, of course, this card is unbeatable. What I mean is the same way I said on the previous video testing the RTX 4060 versus the RX 7600 XT, that there was no point in buying the RX 7600 XT when you had the RTX 4060 with way lower power consumption, being cheaper and so on. I can say the same of the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB. There's no point in buying this card over the RX 7700 XT unless you're in a very strict scenario that you absolutely need that card. With the 7700 XT, you have, of course, lower VRAM and you have higher power draw overall, but you can still tweak it and still be better, and still perform better than the 4060 Ti. But even if you don't tweak it, it will still be faster than the 4060 Ti, sometimes quite faster, depending on the game, of course, while being around $70 cheaper. And if you really want to go to a higher tier price like the 4060 Ti, you have for like $20 more, and it offers you 2 games, you have the 7800 XT that is much faster than the 7700 XT and costs $20 more or $20 more than the 4060 Ti 16GB. So at this price, it makes absolutely no sense to get the 4060 Ti when you have the way cheaper 7700 XT that performs better in rasterization, way better. And even in ray tracing, it kind of matches the 4060 Ti performance in some ray tracing scenarios. Or for $20 more, you have the 7800 XT that will be better in everything, and in terms of power draw, it will be more or less on par, just a little bit higher than the 7700 XT. So once again, makes no sense apart from very specific scenarios, very specific scenarios, to get the RTX 4060 Ti 16GB over the 7700 XT, and especially over the 7800 XT for only $20 more and with 2 games being bundled. And well guys, that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share this video. Leave your comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about the performance of these 2 cards. And tell me if you were or were not impressed with the performance of the 7700 XT, because when I was retesting, yes, because these tests are not old, I used them, I actually retested everything, and I can tell you right away that I was impressed with the 7700 XT results. I thought it would be more or less like the 4060 Ti 16GB, and in some scenarios it will be much slower, and I was actually impressed. Even in benchmarks like, let's say, the Cinebench 1, the Procyon benchmarks, I thought the 7700 XT would be much slower than the 4060 Ti 16GB, and while it is slower, it is not that much slower. And the same applies for gaming. I thought they would be more or less on par in most scenarios, not all, but in most scenarios, but overall the 7700 XT is faster, and I didn't actually see one single game where the 4060 Ti was faster in both resolutions. So overall, the 7700 XT is much faster. It does consume more power, definitely, and you lack the quality of DLSS upscaling, of course. That might be a thing for you, lower power draw and the quality of the DLSS upscaling. But AMD will be releasing soon the first game with FSR 3.1, that is a major uplift in terms of upscaling quality, and now we have FSR 3 frame generation. We have things like lossless scaling for frame generation as well, that you can see here on this video that I made, passing right now on the screen. And I don't see much sense of going for this card, for a way more expensive card, just for the DLSS upscaling or even for frame generation. Once again as well, leave your comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about this topic. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers!